Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day, everyone, and especially to our professor, Dr. Maida Kadtung. I am Normin Alevas Ali, and I will be presenting to you today topics about the psychological foundation of education. Here is my topic outline. We will tackle the concept or definition of psychological foundation of education, the systems of schools of psychology, and review of the biological background of behavior, the learner. It is known a fact that psychology is really a very new science with most advances happening over the past 150 years or so. However, its origins can be traced back to ancient Greece 400 to 500 years before Christ. The emphasis was a philosophical one, with great thinkers such as Socrates influencing Plato, who in turn influenced Aristotle. Philosophers used to discuss many topics now studied by modern psychology, such as memory, free will versus determinism, nature versus nurture, attraction, and so many more. So, what is exactly is psychology? Psychology is the study of human behavior, of how a person acts and reacts under different situations, consciously or unconsciously, mentally, psychologically, physically, overtly or covertly. It is the study of man's reaction to life simulation. Additionally, it has four main goals which are to describe, explain, predict, and change the behavior and mental processes of others. Psychology is actually both an applied and academic field that benefits both individuals and society as a whole. A large part of psychology is devoted to the diagnosis and treatment of mental health issues, but that's just one of the impacts of psychology. Psychology seeks to understand many different aspects of the human mind and behavior, adding new knowledge to our understanding of how people think, as well as developing practical applications that have an important impact on everyday human lives. Now let's tackle the major schools of thought in psychology. The educational concepts and theories are based on the schools of psychology. We have structuralism, functionalism, gestalt psychology, behaviorist school of thought, psychoanalytic school of thought, humanistic school of thought, and cognitive school of thought. They are called schools because they were groups of psychologists who shared a common view of what was important and how it was to be studied in psychology. When psychology first emerged as a science separate from biology and philosophy, the debate over how to describe and explain the human mind and behavior began. The different schools of psychology represent the major theories within psychology. Structuralism is widely regarded as the first school of thought in psychology. This perspective focused on breaking down mental processes into the most basic components. Major thinkers associated with structuralism include Wilhelm Wundt and Edward Titchener. The focus of structuralism was on reducing mental processes down into their most basic elements. It deals with elements of experience, particularly sensation and perception. The structuralists used techniques such as introspection to analyze the inner processes of the human mind. They believe in the importance of the structure of the mind. Meanwhile, in functionalism, it was formed as a reaction to the theories of the structuralist school of thought and was heavily influenced by the work of William James. It functions on the mind's functions and adaptations. Unlike some of the other well-known schools of thought in psychology, functionalism is not associated with a single dominant theorist. Instead, there are some different functionalist thinkers associated with this outlook, including John Dewey, James Roland Angel, and Harvey Carr. Gestalt means pattern. Gestalt psychology is a school of psychology based upon the idea that we experience things as a unified whole. This approach, this approach to psychology began in Germany and Austria during the late 19th century in response to the molecular approach of structuralism. Instead of breaking down thoughts and behavior to their smallest elements, the Gestalt psychologists believe that you must look at the whole experience. According to the Gestalt thinkers, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Well-known individuals in Gestalt psychology are Max Wentheimer, Kurt Kotpa, and Wolfgang Kohler. Behaviorism became a dominant school of thought taught during the 1950s. It was based upon the work of thinkers such as John B. Watson, Ivan Pavlov, B. F. Skinner. Behaviorism suggests that all behavior can be explained by environmental causes rather than by internal forces. Behaviorism is also focused on observable behavior. Theories of learning, including classical conditioning and operant conditioning, were the focus of a great deal of research. The behavioral school of psychology had a significant influence on the course of psychology, and many of the ideas and techniques that emerged from this school of thought are still widely used today. Behavioral training, token economics, aversion therapy, and other techniques are frequently used in psychotherapy and behavior modification programs. The psychoanalytic school of thought. Psychoanalysis is a school of psychology founded by Sigmund Freud. This school of thought emphasized the influence of the unconscious mind on behavior. Its goal was to help the patients understand and accept repressed feelings and find ways to deal with them. Freud believed that the human mind was composed of three elements: the id, ego, and superego. The id consists of primal urges, while the ego is the component of personality charged with dealing with reality. The superego is the part of personality that holds all of the ideals and values we internalize from our parents and culture. Freud believed that the interaction of these three elements was what led to all of the complex human behaviors. Freud's school of thought was enormously influential, but also generated considerable debate. This controversy existed not only in his time but also in modern discussion of Freud's theories. Other major psychoanalytic thinkers include Anna Freud, Carl Jung, and Erik Erikson. Humanistic psychology developed as a response to psychoanalysis and behaviorism. It instead focused on individual free will, personal growth, and the concept of self-actualization. While early schools of thought were primarily centered on abnormal human behavior, humanistic psychology differed considerably in its emphasis on helping people achieve and fulfill their potential. Major humanist thinkers include Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Humanistic psychology remains quite popular today and has had a significant influence on other areas of psychology, including positive psychology. This particular branch of psychology is centered on helping people living happier, more fulfilling lives. Humanistic psychology believes that an individual's behavior is primarily determined by his perception of the world around him. Cognitive psychology is the school of psychology that studies mental processes, including how people think, perceive, remember, and learn. As part of the larger field of cognitive science, this branch of psychology is related to other disciplines, including neuroscience, philosophy, and linguistics. Cognitive psychology began to emerge during the 1950s, partly as a response to behaviorism. Critics of behaviorism noted that it failed to account for how internal processes impacted behavior. This period is sometimes referred to as the cognitive revolution, as a wealth of research on topics such as information processing, language, memory, and perception began to emerge. One of the most influential theories of this school of thought was the stages of cognitive development theory proposed by Jean Piaget. Now the question is, how is psychology interrelated with education? Maybe you have in mind. Psychology actually contributes to a better understanding of the aims of education by defining them and making them clearer. In other words, psychology makes ideas of educational aims clearer. It influences education very strongly due to its blend with different features pertaining to learning and teaching. If a teacher has no knowledge about psychology, he or she will not be able to understand the needs and problems of a child. At the same time, psychology guides us to comprehend the differences individually and counter them with suitable educational strategies. It also helps teachers in guiding students and counseling them. Education is the shaping of behavior, whereas psychology is the study of how, when, and why to shape this behavior. Here are key concepts to remember. First, the psychological basis of education primarily deals with human growth and development. It concerns primarily with understanding the processes of teaching and learning that takes place within formal environments and developing ways of improving those methods. It covers important topics like maturity, intelligence and IQ, language, perception, social, mental, emotional, and moral factors. The said factors affect the child's performance in school as it acquires education. Actually, the psychology used specifically in education is called educational psychology. It is said that education depends on psychology because the kind and amount of education that the learner acquires is conditioned by the psychological traits such as general mental abilities, aptitudes, temperaments, interests, effort-making capacity, physical condition, and etc. Hence, the principles of education are basically based on psychology. While some schools of thought have faded into obscurity, each has had an influence on the course of psychology's development. Some more recent schools of psychology, including behaviorism and cognitive psychology, remain highly influential. Today, many psychologists do not align themselves solely with a single school of thought. Instead, they make a more eclectic approach, drawing upon many different perspectives and theoretical backgrounds. Now let us move on to the review of the biological background of behavior or the learner. Teaching and learning are psychological processes. The teacher is in a better position to select and use methods and techniques that will promote effective learning. There are three components of the educational process which have been the concern of both psychologists and teachers. These are the learner, the learning process, and the learning situation. I will discuss the principles of growth and development and the learner's stage of development. The terms growth and development have been continually used in most readings in psychology. They are used interchangeably although in certain respects both terms, though parallel, imply different definition. Growth essentially refers to quantitative changes in an individual as he progresses in chronological age. It may refer to increases in size, height, or weight. Development, on the other hand, refers to the progressive series of changes of an orderly and coherent type leading to the individual's maturation. This definition emphasizes that for development to be progressive or continuous, there is a direction in the manner in which changes occur. Development is also logical and consistent, essentially because the sequence of changes that occur are related to each other and do not occur haphazardly or abruptly. From this definition or definitions, we can see that although both growth and development imply contrasting types of changes in the individual, both are nonetheless related and complement each other. Why is studying the stages of development important? In many instances, people meet children of varying ages and wonder why each of them displays different characteristics. The focus of the study of development precisely points to these observations. Of course, a teacher who expects to meet the needs of his or her learners must be aware of the various development differences among his or her learners. The knowledge of the pattern of human development will certainly help a teacher to know what to expect of children and at what approximate ages certain patterns of behavior may appear or are expected to appear. Planning for instruction should also be based on certain developmental principles, which to great extent determine what types of learning and amount of learning are appropriate for different age groups. In other cases, knowledge of developmental patterns will allow teachers to identify learners with developmental lags or delays so as to provide guidance and intervention as early as possible. That is why teachers must learn to recognize the significance of this knowledge to their teaching success as well as to the learning process. Now let us understand the factors in growth and development. Two general factors have been influencing human development, namely maturation or natural growth resulting from heredity, and environmental influences in and through which the growing takes place. These two factors are so thoroughly interrelated that it is impossible to isolate their specific influences. Every individual is born with definite potentialities of development passed on to him by his parents through heredity. These heredity potentialities for many kinds of behavior patterns continue to develop for months or even years. This process by which heredity exerts its influence long after birth is called maturation. Although as individual inherits trait potentialities from his parents, the direction that these characteristics follow during the process of growth and development depends upon the individual's environment. That is why behavior traits develop only after interaction with environmental influences. Modes of behavior at a given time in the life of an individual are not determined by heredity or environment working alone. Instead, they are the product of the interaction between his inherited tendencies and potentialities and those environmental influences by which he is stimulated. For example, while the ability to vocalize and the capacity for learning to make intelligible sounds are inherited, the language the child speaks is the result of the language he is exposed to during the growth process. Remember, a child is not born with skills, emotional controls, or attitudes. Such qualities are taught and develop only when his inherited adapted neurological muscular systems are given the correct stimulus at a moment when they are ready. It is at this point where education plays an important role in the development of an individual. From numerous studies conducted on growth and development, developmental psychologists have established some basic principles of developmental change that occur over the life cycle. Number one, development is continuous. The process of growth and development continues from conception till the individual reaches maturity. Development of both physical and mental traits continues gradually until these traits reach their maximum growth. It goes on and continuously throughout life. Even after maturity has been attained, development does not end. And number two, development is gradual. In development is gradual, it only emphasizes that development does not come all of a sudden. It is also cumulative in nature. Next is three, development is sequential. Most psychologists agree that development is sequential or orderly. Every species, whether animal or human, follows a pattern of development peculiar to it. This pattern is general, is the same for all individuals. The child crawls before he creeps, stands before he walks, and babbles before he talks. Number four, rate of development varies person to person. This emphasizes that the rate of development is not uniform. Individuals differ in the rate of growth and development. Boys and girls have different development rates. Each part of the body has its own particular rate of growth. There are periods of great intensity and equilibrium, and there are periods of imbalance. Number five, development proceeds from general to specific. Development proceeds from general to specific. In all areas of development, general activity always precedes specific activity. For example, the fetus moves its whole body but is incapable of making specific responses. With respect to emotional behavior, infants approach strange and unusual objects with some sort of general fear response. Number six, most traits are correlated in development. Generally, it is seen that the child whose mental development is above average is also superior in so many other aspects like health, sociability, and special aptitudes. Number seven, growth and development is a product of both heredity and environment. Development is influenced by both heredity and environment. Both are responsible for human growth and development. Number eight, development is predictable. The difference in physiological and psychological potentialities can be predicated by observation and psychological tests. Number nine, development. This principle emphasizes that development brings about both structural and functional changes. And number 10, there is a constant interaction between all factors of development. Development in one area is highly related to development in other areas. For example, a child who has good health can be active socially and intellectually. Okay, now let us proceed to the learner stages of development. There are 8 stages of development usually ascribed to the lifespan of human beings. These stages, which are based on chronological age, are listed below. Corresponding to each stage are characteristics often achieved by individuals within each specified age group. Number 1. Number 1, prenatal or the conception to birth. It is the age when heredity, endowments, and sex are fixed and all body features, both external and internal, are developed. This is from conception to birth. The inherited characteristics from the parents are also imparted during this period. Number two, infancy or birth to 2 years. This is the foundation age when basic behavior patterns are organized and many ontogenic maturational skills emerge. Basic physical and physiological behavior patterns begin to develop, such as rolling, crawling, sitting, walking, laughing, taking solid food, controlling the elimination of waste, and learning sex differences. And number three, early childhood or the age 2 to 6 years. This emphasizes the exploratory of social circles and questioning when language and elementary reasonings are acquired and initial socialization is experienced. This is the preschool age, although some parents are already taking their children to kindergarten. The developmental tasks during these early years are based mostly on the successive maturation of various parts of the body and on the family environment. Success or failure in the performance of these tasks will considerably affect the performance of other tasks in the succeeding periods of development. Although individuals differ in the rate at which they learn tasks, children are expected to learn these tasks fairly well by the time they begin formal schooling. After the basic motor skills have been fairly well developed, the degree of success with which they accomplish these early tasks will depend on the large extent on experiences they have with such tasks. It is at this point where nursery and kindergarten education can be very valuable in helping the child succeed and fail in these tasks. Number four, late childhood, 6 to 12 years old. The age of social circles and creativity when self-help skills, social skills, school skills, and play skills are developed. This is the elementary school period, where the child learns some manual skills at home and in school. For example, reading, writing, arithmetic or language, and etc. Since the late childhood period covers the elementary school years, guiding and helping a child to achieve mastery of this task becomes a major concern of the school. Although the family and community environment continue to provide experiences to the child in learning this task, the school gradually assumes a large share in this responsibility during this period. Number five, adolescence or puberty to 18 years. This is transition age from childhood to adulthood when sex maturation and rapid physical development occur, resulting to changes in ways of feeling, thinking, and acting. In fact, man at this stage is already capable of procreation. Teaching adolescents is not easy. An adolescent spends less and less time at home and more outside the home. In most cases, he spends his time in school and in school-related activities. Although adolescent school may seem to be a burden, he finds it a source of friendship and a place for sharing social activities. In view of this, the school has a significant role in guiding the adolescent learner in achieving mastery of the developmental tasks. If the adolescent achieves success in these tasks through the school, in cooperation with the home and the community, then he will proceed through this period to adulthood with relatively little difficulty. Number six, early adulthood or 18 to 40 years old. This is the age of adjustment to new patterns of life and new roles such as spouse, parent, and breadwinner. New life adjustments occur such as courtship, marriage, parenthood, employment, recreational hobby, religious affiliation, and etc. This is the start of productive years. A number of adults go back to school because they feel certain inadequacies in their previous education to achieve this developmental task. As a result, there has been an increasing interest in college education. An adult who goes to school usually does so because he wants to. He has a definite educational aim in view and he wants to achieve these aims as quickly and as completely as possible. Hence, he expects the content of learning materials and teaching techniques to be clear, definite, and suited to his needs. Schools involved in the education of the adult will have to provide such education that will satisfy his needs. Number 7. Middle age or 40 years to retirement. This year is part of adulthood. It is also the transition age when adjustments to initial physical and mental decline are experienced. At this stage, man or woman must achieve most of their life as aspiration in life, such as a well-established home and family, stable or lucrative employment or business, creative achievement, even political achievement. Number 8, old age, retirement to death. This is a period of retirement when increasingly rapid physical and mental decline are experienced. So that is the end of my topic. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have gained from the topics that I discussed. And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for listening. So here are the sources that I use in my discussion. I have listed it below.